Welcome to the Project Endure podcast, the place where we talk about life, endurance, persistence, perspective, and so much more. I'm Joe Rinaldi, and I'll be your host. Let's jump in. Before we get started, let me thank you for being here. The stories on this podcast are meant to let you know that you're not alone in what you're going through, and that we can all find strength in struggle with the right perspective. If you've been enjoying the podcast, let me ask that you leave a review on your platform of choice to help us grow so that we can continue to make the world a better place, one conversation at a time. Now, let's get to the episode. Welcome back to the Project Endure podcast, episode 86. We have myself, Joe Rinaldi, and we have a very special guest here in Philadelphia, Jess Leventry. Jess, how are you?
I'm good, Joe. How are you doing today?
I am great. We actually just got off of a coaching call right before this, so I feel like we've warmed up. We're in a rhythm. I've been looking forward to this all week. And I would love to just throw the ball in your court and let you introduce yourself to the audience, however you see fit.
Absolutely. And before we get started, I feel like whenever I listen to podcasts, I always am curious about the person questioning. So I just want to start off by saying that, Joe, you've been such an inspiration and literally such a light in my life. And I know from a coaching, friendship level, whatever that looks like, you are such a big inspiration and you have helped me achieve so much. So I feel like everyone's always like wondering who's Joe Rinaldi. He's awesome. So I just want to start that off. But going into your original question, yes, my name is Jess Leventry. I grew up right outside of Bucks County area, right outside of Philadelphia. So always been in Philadelphia. So grew up there, graduated a huge high school, went to Penn State, studied marketing, didn't really know what I wanted to do, but kind of the first job I got that I could graduate with a full-time job I took. So I currently work in corporate America for a financial services company, which I actually do love, which is awesome. And then I'm also a fitness coach. So I do group training in the morning.
Got it. So I want to rewind pretty far back.
Yes.
Tell us about your childhood, because I think there's a lot in all of our childhoods that shape us into the people that we become. And I'd like to use that as the foundation before we move forward. So just big picture overview. I mean, what were you like as a kid?
That's a great question. So I would say I was definitely extremely bubbly as a kid. Like I always wanted to be constantly around people. I would say I had a very large friend group and I always wanted to do stuff with everyone all the time. But before that kind of started, I actually had, I would say, a more challenging childhood. And I think you don't realize it at the time when you're, growing up, but, at a certain point, you really understand everything that you went through and kind of how that shapes who you are and your perspectives. And I'll just start with, I swear to God, kids can be brutal, absolutely brutal. And I definitely struggled a lot with, going to different schools, getting in a crowd that was really, really hard, high level, basically, just like bullying constantly, like stuff that, just shouldn't happen, but unfortunately it does. Honestly, to the point where it's crazy, but I would be spending so many days in the principal's office just because of the problems that were going on. And this was like elementary school, like kindergarten to fifth grade. It was just like this constant repeated, bullying and just like things that were just a very toxic environment. So eventually it got so bad. I told my parents, I was like, I can't go back to school. I'm not going to go. I can't do this to myself. So I finally changed schools, things changed. And that was like the best point in my life, honestly, to get away from that and start totally fresh. And that's kind of when that bubbly Jess came out and really thrived. Ever since then, I just, I took advantage of everything that was right in front of me, like school related, sports related. I was there. And I actually found like a really good circle of friends who are still my closest friends today. But definitely had a very struggling time in the beginning stages, I would say.
Yeah, I was speaking at a middle school about a year ago, and the topic was gratitude and adversity and finding your strength, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of the things that we talk about on this podcast.
Yeah.
And they opened it up to a question and answer at the end. And I was expecting people to ask me, is it hard to be losing your eyesight, or, parts about my story or the things I spoke about? And I probably got 20 questions, and 15 of them were about bullying. What do I do if someone's bullying me? Or how do I handle it when my friends are mean to me? And I was not ready for that. I wasn't. And, you know, I'm curious for you if you look back at that time and wonder what those bullies were going through, or if that was a perspective that maybe you didn't have at the time, but you have now. Because I think it's very true that hurt people, and a lot of the people that are doing the bullying are really hurting themselves.
Absolutely. And that's such a good point. I think at the time, obviously, I didn't know why. But now looking back, I think there was multiple different things. Obviously, I was in a school in a different area. So I think just that area in general was different from how I was living. And unfortunately, there's a lot of economic differences that go into that too, that I think played a potential factor. And still, I don't know for sure. But I think if you see people with different opportunities than you, obviously, you kind of get this feeling inside. And I think maybe that's something that, you take out on other people. I don't know. That's something I still kind of struggle with trying to figure out. But I will say, like, as crazy as it is, it's a small thing, but it impacts the hell out of you. And I will say one of the best things though that I've learned from that is just like a whole new perspective where I know how I want to treat other people and really be intentional with that, because I know how terrible that feels sometimes. And I would never want anyone else to feel that way, and anyone else to, you know, feel very self-conscious and not certain about how they look or how they feel, if something's wrong with them. Like, that's just something you don't want to put on anyone else. So I think through that whole experience of growing up through that, I've realized really how to treat people. And honestly, as crappy as it was to go through it, I'm thankful that it happened, because it's another perspective for even my children when I have them.
That's such a great way of looking at it. And it reminds me of a quote from Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who said, "The most beautiful people we have known are those who have known defeat, known suffering, known struggle, known loss, and have found their way out of the depths. These persons have an appreciation, a sensitivity, and an understanding of life that fills them with compassion, gentleness, and a deep loving concern. Beautiful people do not just happen." And it sounds like that experience with bullying made you into the beautiful person that you are today.
That is so powerful, Joe. I love that quote. I need that after we're done here. But I couldn't agree more. I think it really just changes the way you act and think about everything, the way you approach people. And unfortunately, that's just how life is. If you're not approachable and you can't, accept everyone, you're gonna have a hard time with this life. So I think it's so important. And like, yeah, you're totally right. And like, it's perspective on everything.
Yeah. So to now transition a little bit into the fitness side of your story, I'm curious how you got into fitness, because for me, probably like most middle school age boys, it was just because you want to look better, look stronger, maybe get a girlfriend, that kind of thing. For you, where did fitness start and why did fitness start?
Mhm. So I have an older brother who was always in sports, and him and I were super close, but also very competitive. And when he started playing sports, I was sure as hell gonna go play football with him and try and be better than him. So at a young age, like, him and I were just like either playing soccer or football nonstop when we were younger. And eventually that shifted me into taking up track and then taking up volleyball. And volleyball was like my biggest sport. I played that all throughout high school, and then in a little bit into college, just more for fun. Obviously, Penn State people are like 6'3" and above, so that's not me. But through that, I also learned just how much I loved fitness and working out. And I think that was always like my biggest outlet for whatever frustration I had or whatever, like internally. Fitness has always been that area where I can just let go and let go of whatever is going on and just not solve everything, but it gets you to think about a lot. It gives you, again, going back to perspective, so much perspectives. And I always left after a workout or whatever it was, just feeling so much better, no matter the situation. And it's almost like an addiction, you know what I mean? And I like working out people would totally agree. But once you start, you get addicted to that feeling and you just want to keep going. And for me, that's, when I left sports, it was an automatic, easily like, okay, this is it for me. And it just became literally not even a habit. It's like a daily to do. Like I got to do it. I got to check the box every single day.
Mm. So recently, very recently, you just PR'd a marathon. And so I'll let you share the details, but I would love for you to paint the picture of, running your first marathon, what that was like, the transition through training to this current marathon, and maybe some of the differences and just how that all went.
Yeah, I love that question. Very timely. So in the past 4 months, yeah, that's when I first started prepping for my first marathon back in November was it? That was definitely one of the scariest things I've done. Before that, I only did half marathons, but I always have this thing where, okay, well, I got comfortable with half marathons. So like, what's next? Like, I know I never felt like I emptied my tank, if you will. So that was scary as hell. But I was so, so, so thrilled to finish like my first marathon back in Philly. That experience, like I'll never forget. I think the energy on race day was just insane, and so much fun. But not even that. I think I just learned so much about myself and just that obviously doing something that I've always dreamt of doing to me was just so rewarding in every single way. And to earn those like 26 miles and just feel like on top of the world to me was awesome. So first marathon was incredible, and my goal was honestly just to finish and just to feel happy and just enjoy it. And then, since then, the second marathon was in Austin, Texas, which was literally like 2 weeks ago now. And I told you I wanted to be sub 4 so bad. I wanted to shave off that time, and I know I could. It was just a matter of making sure like my training was right and all of that. And I was scared of Austin even more because I think I knew what the marathon was going to bring for me. I knew it was going to be hilly, and I knew I was not ready for like I was ready, but have I done that many hills before? No. And I think there was all this pressure as well because like all of our friends were down there, and obviously I wanted to do my best. And then in the back of my head, I'm like, shit, am I going to be able to do this? Like I keep saying I'm going to do this, but like, can I actually do it? So it was just like a mental game, but I'm just so, so happy with the way that Austin played out. I didn't think even with all those hills that I was going to actually like stay a consistent like 8:30 pace, to be honest. But I'm like actually really proud of myself. And I couldn't have done that without you. But I'm like so ready to take on the next race now. I'm like, okay, what's next? Like I gotta PR again and like set another goal. And I think that's what's so fun about this sport is that you can constantly do these and you'll always have a new goal. You can always, always do better at something, whatever it is. So I think that's what's most exciting. And it's honestly, again, it goes back to the whole addicting thing, once you start, you just got to keep going.
I was having a conversation with another client of mine earlier today about tattoos and how you could be sitting in the chair and it's painful. And then right even before it's over, right? You're not even done, but you're in this pain and your mind is going, oh, wow, I kind of want another one.
Right.
And I feel like running, or, you could probably correlate this to most things in fitness is like that, right? I'm sure there were points in the marathon where you just wanted the pain to stop, where you were like, okay, I'm good running. I don't
Yeah,
need to run for a while. And then you finish and you're like, I want to do another one of those. Uh,
absolutely.
so Jess, let me ask you, Philadelphia Marathon, what was the total time? Austin Marathon, what was the time?
Philly was, I think, 4:05. And then Austin was 3:45 or 46,
So
somewhere
about
around.
20 minutes off.
Yeah.
It's not bad.
Yeah.
Just to give people an inside look into this, because I think it's interesting. One of the conversations that you and I had throughout prep was about emptying the tank at the end of runs. And I think that was something that you had struggled with a bit. And I also know from other conversations that other people struggle with that as well. So I would love to just hear your perspective on that concept of emptying the tank now that you're on the other side of the Austin Marathon.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's such a good thing to call out because I know we've had multiple conversations and it's honestly been the biggest struggle of mine for the two training blocks that we've done together was just like I would end my runs and I knew I just like I still had so much more in me and I had this like goal in mind and I could do it, but was I giving 100%? Like no. And now after the Austin Marathon, I feel like I don't know my limit per se, but I do know how to actually empty that tank. And it was the hardest thing. Like I would be running like 10 miles and it's like, I was just like at a comfortable pace and I would end not even out of breath. And I'm like, well, what am I doing? You know what I mean? I know I had so much more in me and there's just like this huge threshold of capacity that I was just not reaching. And then going into the marathon and actually seeing what I was capable of. And I know there's more. I know there's so much more, but just seeing that I think has helped me visualize what I want to do and knowing that I have the ability to really like empty that tank and give everything 100% my all to the point where I feel it when I cross that finish line or when I stop my watch. Like I feel really good that I gave, 110%.
What do you think was the hardest part about emptying the tank during training? If we had to dig into that a little bit, because I think there's a parallel to life, and I'll expand on that after you give your answer.
Absolutely. I hope I'm going the right way with this because I think I know where you're going to go. But I think it's just a matter of, living in comfort and being uncomfortable. And I think it goes back to just like constantly this whole growth mindset. In order to grow, you have to be uncomfortable. And for whatever reason, for me, it was like this constant struggle where I was just in this comfortable phase, um, to the point where I knew that there was this other side that I had so much more growth potential I wasn't reaching. And I think that's why I was getting frustrated too. Was just like, I got to flip this switch. And like, the only way I'm going to be able to do the things that I want to do is if I go 100% all in on being that uncomfortable person and being the uncomfortable side. And that might end in failure. And I think I'm also afraid to fail at things. So it's this whole like battle in my head of like, okay, failure sucks but I'm going to be uncomfortable, or stay comfortable and succeed. And I think it just goes hand in hand. It's really, really, really hard sometimes to make that shift over.
I used to struggle with the same exact thing until, and I don't know how this happened, but something happened. And maybe it was a series of conversations and content I consumed and just reflection. But I was able to reframe failure, true failure, as giving up on things that truly matter. So, the failure, in quotes, of not finishing the workout or the failure of, falling short of a benchmark that you were aiming for, right? To me, that's not failure. I stretched myself and I didn't get there and I'll try again and I'll be better for it. I'll get back up, etc. True failure is giving up on the things that matter most. And so growth mindset is so powerful, but it's also so hard because I think a lot of us, not just you, not just me, are afraid of failure because we're afraid of what other people think. And I'm sure there are a lot of people listening to this nodding their heads in agreement. And I don't know if it's something that most of us ever fully get over, but I think conversations like this are a step in the right direction.
Absolutely. And just going on that too, I think it's just the environment that we're in. Like people project so much out of their personal life on social media, but you don't know, like that's just an example, but you don't know the full extent of anything, but you constantly put in your head, okay, this person is doing that and this person's doing that. Like that's what I want to do. And you're seeing that. And I think it's scary because you see how like so many people doing something that you want to do, and you can see no one's failing over there, but they're not showing you everything. They show you the highlights, they show you the finish lines, they show you the gold medals, they show you everything at the end a lot of the time. And it's like you set these expectations in your head, and it's so hard to throw them aside because we're constantly consuming everyone else's success. And I've been thinking about that so much lately too. I had a conversation with someone earlier, but it's just like this whole environment that we live in, unfortunately, is just, a highlight reel. And when you start to struggle, again, you're uncomfortable, and it's like, okay, now I'm frustrated because I can't reach my success. And this isn't what everyone else is doing. And it's just like this whole comparison thing. It's really, really hard, especially now. I think it's only ever going to get worse unless we start to have more conversations like this and actually be, vulnerable and honest on social media or whatever it is to other people about, everything that goes on to get that success.
Yeah, that was really well said. And I don't have too much to add because I think you hit the nail on the head. And so, with that, Jess, I want to transition to the first big question of the podcast. I think
Yes.
you know what's coming, but when you look back at your life so far, what's the hardest thing that you've ever had to handle? So, a circumstance that you didn't get to choose for yourself.
Yeah. That's so hard. I would say one of the hardest things that I have gone through was losing myself unintentionally. Um, uh, you know, I look back in the last couple of years, and there's this whole like black space, and I try to remember things, and I like physically can't. I will try so hard to remember. It's like you almost like blur out a time frame in your life, and you just like can't even remember. Um, so unfortunately, I had my fair share of different relationships and different things going on. And unfortunately, through that process, I think I just lost who Jess Leventry was, fully lost her, to almost the point where I wanted to shrink myself in a way, I guess is the best way to put it. And that kind of went through like different eating disorders and sorry, and kind of all that stuff just to, in a way, to kind of like put away Jess almost, just because I like seriously was not remotely happy. And I'm someone that wants to make everyone else happy. So that's kind of why I would try so hard to focus in on everyone else and put Jess last. And that was definitely like the hardest thing to go through. And I think the hardest part then is to refocus and realign everything else in your life back to you. And unfortunately, I'll say like some people will never be able to do that, which is scary, and it's really, really sad. But I think bringing the right people back into your life, and refocusing, recentering, those people will like bring you back, and be with you every single step of the way. And I'm so grateful that over the past like year and a half, I have surrounded myself with so much love and just like literally the best people that remembered me, and were able to like bring me back to who I was. So that was a lot, but it's definitely been like just like an unintentional loss of who I was, but a very intentional year to bring her back, and it's been phenomenal. And again, it just goes back to the people that you bring around you and you put in your corner. It means everything, and it helps a ton.
Thank you for sharing. You apologized when you got emotional, but you never have to apologize for that. I think it's really special and really strong to be able to open up like that, knowing that there are people listening to this conversation. And I'm sure there are people who are getting emotional with you because they also have lost who they are. I'm curious for you if there was a moment or a time frame where you realized that you had lost Jess, because I would imagine that for a while you were just going with the flow and life. You were living life, and then all of a sudden you have this realization that who I am right now is not who Jess is.
Yeah. There was multiple times I would say, but I think the biggest thing was just going back to my family and like my mom and I, we have the best relationship and she knows me inside and out. And I've lived in Philly for a while, but every time, I would come home, it was just constant like, what the hell's going on? Like, we got to fix this. And like having someone that important to me and that close to me who knows me inside and out, like it opens your eyes and makes you realize. But at the same time, I was having thoughts that like I never want to have. And I was just like, I know better. And I'm like, I can't possibly be thinking this right now. Like, I can't possibly want this for me because I know that there's so many other things that I want to accomplish and want to be able to do. Like, I can't think this way. And the minute I started to actually listen to my thoughts, I was like, okay, something's wrong and I'm going to fix it. Cause I have so much there's so many things I want to do and so many opportunities that I would be dumb not to take advantage of. So it was definitely like multiple factors, but I think it was like the people around me reminding me and then also really taking time to listen into what was going through my head.
You don't have to answer this question, or you can keep it super simple. But those things that were going through your head that you started to become aware of and say to yourself, this is not me. I don't want to think these things. Do you mind sharing one or two of those things?
Absolutely. I mean, it's not like, I don't think I was like suicidal, obviously, but I definitely like very depressed. And I would tell myself, obviously, like, I'm not capable of doing this. Like, this, I can't possibly do these things, like, I'm not good enough for this. People are telling me one thing and I'm believing it. And it's like, I'm not good enough. And I constantly tell myself, I can't do these things. I noticed it in the way I was working and the way I was coaching. I realized it in my relationships that this thought was like literally going through and seeping into everything that was going on in my life. And finally I was just like, this is not me. Like, this is so not me. So it took me a while to like, I'm still working on it. It's such a work in progress to actually shift that mindset with everything.
Hmm. I will say, I think sometimes things do need to be lost so that we can find them. Um, Episode 72 of this podcast with Elena Smale, she spoke on self worth and actually used the phrase remembering who you are instead of finding who you are. Because I think deep down inside, we all know who we are. And sometimes we lose that or we forget that or it gets blurred by the things around us or the people around us. And it's so cool to know that in this past year, you've begun to intentionally pursue remembering who you are. And I'm curious if you had to define that, if you had to say Jess Leventry is what is, who is.
That's so hard. I will say, and actually, an angel named Amanda walked into my life not so long ago, and she has opened my eyes to so many things. But I love what she said, and like I feel like I do this a lot. And she's like, lead with your heart, and she's constantly told me that, and I feel like that's something that I try to do as much as possible. And I think Jess Leventry definitely leads with her heart. She wants the best for people. She wants to spread love and spread happiness at the end of the day, no matter what else in life. I think that those are the two biggest things that are so important aside from, materialistic things. Like, bottom line, if you don't have anything, love and happiness are one of the two biggest things. And if I can spread that and share that with the relationships that I have and people in my life, like, that's number one for me. And Amanda really has opened my eyes to a lot of things and she's helped me a ton too. So if she's listening, she's living my angel. I love you, Amanda. But going off of that too, I will say one more thing. I know we've had a few deep runs before and definitely a lot of emotions have come out. But going back to this whole thing, I feel like a lot of my runs, I've constantly told myself that I'm not yet where I want to be, but I'm so damn thankful that I'm not where I used to be. And I will say that repeatedly and repeatedly and repeatedly because it's always going to be a work in progress. And I think when we start to look back and have that perspective again, that, where I was a year ago, 2 years ago, it's not just Leventry. That's not who I am. And I know that there's so much more in front of me that I hope to accomplish and get to. And that's what keeps me going.
That's such a great answer. I love that. And I think it transitions well into what I'm going to ask you next, because I think part of remembering and creating and strengthening who we are requires, like you said earlier, to be uncomfortable, to pursue growth intentionally. And you've done a lot of hard things throughout your life. I know recently you've done a few hard things in the fitness endurance space, but what is the hardest thing that you've ever done on purpose, and why have you done that thing?
I think the hardest thing on purpose is recreating myself and visualizing, okay, and I know this isn't physical, but visualizing who I really want to be and making sure that I get there. And what are those steps that I need to do in order to be that person? It's the hardest thing because, again, you're constantly hearing different expectations about who you should be from your friends, your family, your social media. And it's hard to filter all of that out. And again, lead with your heart and go back into, okay, who does Jess Leventry want to be? And really, really, really understanding what your heart and your inside looks like. And I took a shit ton of notes from you and Nick's podcast while I was driving to work. Definitely not good. But the one question I loved was that what fulfills you and what makes you happy? And there is such a huge difference in that. And I love that question, Joe, because again, that helped me at least think about, okay, in this whole recreation of Jess Leventry, I'm going through this whole process of one of the hardest things that I've done. I'm trying to understand what fulfills me and what makes me happy. And those two things are going to be like the guiding light in this whole journey for me. So I appreciated the hell out of that conversation and that question because that's something that was really eye-opening that I wrote down.
I'm glad that you found it impactful, and I'll just use this as a chance to say I hope that everybody listening to this podcast or any of the podcasts feels like they're part of the conversation. I know that when I listen to podcasts, my mind is nonstop, kind of inserting myself into the conversation, answering the questions, thinking about how I would respond to things. And I think there is a lot of value in that, is being part of these conversations where you can be challenged, where you can think in a deep way that maybe you don't think like on a normal basis. And so I'm glad to hear that. And I love it. I mean, fulfillment, that is, and happiness is so important. I'm curious for you, what's the difference between those two things, if there is a difference between fulfillment and happiness?
Mm-hmm. I don't know if this is the right way to think about it, but this is how I think, where I think happiness is like surface level, right? It's like kind of baseline, okay, this makes me, feel a certain way. But in order to fulfill you, I think there's got to be additive value. There's got to be an impact there. Like you have to feel this deeper feeling with like fulfillment. Um, More than anything than just like happiness. I think happiness is just a very broad emotion, but when we think about, okay, what really fulfills me, like you really have to think deep and you have to think, okay, where do I feel like my truest self? In what actions am I taking or how am I thinking that really like allows me to be fulfilled? And I think that's like one of the toughest things that like a lot of people can't answer because it's such a hard question and it takes like a lot of time to actually like really, really, really dig deep and think about that.
I agree with you. And I would also add that I think fulfillment, unlike happiness, requires other people to be involved. Maybe not in a direct way, but I think fulfillment requires something bigger than us. I think fulfillment requires meaning, purpose, whatever phrase you want to attach to it. It requires an impact that is bigger than just us. And I think that's where a lot of people feel unfulfilled in life is they sit behind a computer and they work a job where they feel like they're not actually making a difference for another human being. Or they spend most of their day with their head down in their screen, not actually having conversations with the people around them. And I think we feel so detached sometimes from the world around us, even though we're supposed to be more connected than ever. And I think there's a big lack of fulfillment because of that.
Spot on, Joe. Spot on. I 100% agree. And unfortunately, like that's just kind of like society right now. And it's scary. It's scary that that's like a day to day. Even I feel that every single day. Some days, working from home, it's so hard to find that fulfillment. And that's kind of how coaching came into my life too. It was just kind of, okay, how can I make an impact? And like, I'm a very people person. So really finding that additive fulfillment every single day is so important to me.
Let's talk about that actually. Group fitness coaching. I'm curious what's the most challenging part for you and what's the most rewarding part for you?
What's the most challenging part? I think constantly bringing something to the table beyond just fitness. Like I think it's so fun, but it's also hard because it makes me think a little bit harder. I'm like, okay, what do I want to say to these people today? What is my message for them? Like I want all of my members or clients to walk out the door thinking about something like similar to this podcast, like getting them to think and have a different perspective or a different goal or, realizing their worth or their potential. Like I want people who ever come into my classes to realize that all the time, every time they're with me. I think that is so important to me. So that's definitely number one. That's definitely the hardest thing. But I'm blanking on the last part of that question.
So that was the most challenging part for you. What's the most rewarding part for you?
Most rewarding part. That's easy. I love seeing people do something they've never thought that they could do before. And I love seeing like progress, and every week, every month, whatever it looks like, progress can be so many different forms, in so many different ways, whether it's not even just weight, but even just mindset or, changing habits to work out more frequently. Whatever that looks like for me, it makes me so happy to see someone else light up and smile, realizing that they can do hard things, and doing hard things is there's a huge spectrum for so many people, right? Obviously. But starting out on a smaller scale for some people and taking a small step every single day is doing hard things for them and seeing them accomplish that is so rewarding. So I think for me, it's just like, and going back to the whole fulfillment thing, like that is what fulfills me every single day. If I could have that every single day and see other people light up, realizing their self-worth, like I would be on top of the world.
Yeah. And it sounds like your mind is moving you in that direction. I don't want to speak for you, but I think we very much are we gravitate toward the things that we want when we visualize them, when we think about them, when we're intentional about pursuing them. And I see that in you. I also want to circle back to something else you said earlier about comparison and living the life that other people maybe expect us to live or think we should live.
Yeah.
I'm a firm believer that when we live as we think other people let me rewind there. When we live like we think other people think we should live, we miss out on living the life that we could live. So when we live the life that we think we should live, we miss out on living the life that we could live. And potential has to come through our authentic being. We can't fulfill our potential if we're not authentic. And that's where that gets really dangerous is we live the life we think other people think we should live and we miss out on the life we could be living. There's a quote, Charles Horton Cooley. Stick with me here because this one will make your mind spin. I'm going to
Okay.
read it twice. He said, I am not who you think I am. I am not who I think I am. I am who I think you think I am. So I'm going to read that one more time. I am not who you think I am. I am not who I think I am. I am who I think I am. And if we're not intentional, we can fall into this trap of living a life that we think other people think we should be living. That's scary.
100%. It is very scary. And I will say that, you know, growing up, obviously, I think our families want the best for us. Obviously, that's a given. But having expectations from parents is really, really hard. And again, you're the one that knows yourself better than anyone else, and you know what makes you happy. And I will say I've fallen in that trap so many times where I'm trying to please everyone else and I'm trying to do what they're telling me to do. But at the end of the day, is that the happiest version of Jess? Absolutely not. And it's so hard to change other people's expectations when they're supposed to have the best intention for you, and all out of love with what I'm saying. But I think it's really, really hard to do that for sure.
Yeah. It's a big challenge. And it's a work in progress for most of us for most of our lives, if not all of our lives.
Mhm.
And speaking of our lives, it's a long life. And again, granted, it can end just like that. We don't know how much time we have, but we have to be prepared to live a life full of endurance. We have to be prepared to live a long life, to play the long game, to do what's hard over and over and over again. When you hear the word endurance, Jess, what does that mean for you?
This is very timely because I literally just wrote this out after the Austin Marathon. Um, Endurance, I've learned from you, Joe, actually, is one of my favorite words because I realized that starting, throughout endurance training, it's so similar to life. Um, and there is, hills, transitions, all of these different challenges that we've spoke on. And it's so similar to life in that, like, it is some of the biggest struggles that you'll ever go through. But to be able to build that endurance up, you start to see different perspectives of what a challenge is and what an opportunity is. And I kind of wrote that out, but I think it's so eye-opening that the minute you start to endure and do hard things and embrace the struggle, you get a whole nother perspective on so many opportunities out in front of you. And I think it goes back to being uncomfortable. But I think endure is just such an awesome word because you can run with it in so many different ways. But it really means to do the hard things and do it continuously to the point where those hard things don't seem very hard anymore.
I love that. And I'm honored that when you think of the word endurance, you think of some of the things that I've said. It means a lot. I have two quotes for you.
Okay.
One is from an unknown author, and it goes, running is nothing more than a series of arguments between the part of your brain that wants to stop and the part that wants to keep going. And I feel like endurance very much is that argument, that internal battle and dialogue between the ears, between the part of you that wants to stop and the part of you that wants to keep going. And I think successful endurance requires us to choose and side with the part that wants to keep going more often than not, because none of us are perfect.
Right.
And then the second quote from Alice Morse Earl, she said, every day may not be a good day, but there's something good in every day. And I think endurance requires us to adopt that perspective and to find the good in the bad, to find the growth in the hard, to find the strength in the struggle. And it's not something that comes overnight, but I think surrounding yourself with people who think along those lines is a great place to start. And then just practicing that with every piece of adversity is an opportunity to practice that. And you have to be willing and ready to shift your perspective day in and day out over and over and over again.
Unreal, Joe. I could not agree anymore. I think it's really, really telling, this whole endure, word and just the way we think about it. And I think it allowed me again to really think about the process, what goes into that process, and embracing the transitions of life instead of being scared of them. It's incredible.
Yeah. I think sometimes good things need to fall apart so better things can fall together. And that transition period where some things are starting to fall apart, but that other thing hasn't fully started to form yet is it could be a time full of fear, but we have to trust that things are happening for us, not to us. And things work out.
Absolutely. I wish people could see how big I'm smiling right now. I love those quotes. I seriously love them.
I should compile a list of quotes on this podcast and just blast it out to everybody who listens.
I need
Um, well, let me ask you this, Jess. So there are people all over the place listening to this podcast, different stages and seasons of life. Some people might feel a very strong sense of self. Some people might have no idea who they are right now, and everywhere in between. But you get to speak to them all. If somebody's struggling, going through a tough time, not sure where to go or what to do, what would you say to them?
That's great. I think I would go back to kind of what we talked about earlier and just kind of my whole process in my head when I'm running, and just to remind people that no matter what stage they're at, whatever they might be going through, I think it's always important to remind ourselves that, you know, you're not where you want to be yet. A lot of us will never get there for a really long time. But I think it's really important to pause, stop everything, and remind yourself that you're not where you used to be, and to really again go look at the growth that you've made, the progress, the journey that you're on, and really appreciate the stepping stones that you've created to take one step at a time and move forward. I think at the end of the day, it's so important that we continuously move forward. And I told you one of my favorite small two words put together, it's fall forward. And I love that because you're taking risks, and no matter, even if you fail sometimes, whatever you're doing, whatever tough spot you're in, to keep moving forward and to take that lesson learned and keep moving. Because again, it's important to not fall back to who you used to be, but always keep your eye and body in mind moving forward.
I shared this on the podcast with Preston Bear episode, I want to say off the top of my head, 82. I think that's right. And I wrote a letter to my sister when she graduated high school, and I titled it Change But Stay the Same, because I love so much of who she is.
Mm-hmm.
She's caring, compassionate, driven, etc. I wanted those things to stay. I wanted that core of who she was to stay the same. However, I wanted her to change. I wanted her to grow. I wanted her to explore new things and push her limits. And that concept of change but stay the same is a lot of what I'm hearing you say. And being grateful that you're not who you used to be, but not forgetting at your core who you've always been as you continue to build toward the person you want to be is a really, really, really hard but rewarding journey that I'm just so grateful that you're on and sharing about.
No, I appreciate that, Joe. And it's probably better said that you said than me, but 100%. I couldn't agree more. And I'm really thankful that you're a part of my journey too.
Oh, thanks, Jess. So let's do this. If people are listening and they want to follow along with your journey, they want to connect with you, reach out and just say, thanks for sharing your story. Where's the best place for people to do that?
Yes. Usually my Instagram, that's like my biggest platform right now. And my handle, if you don't provide it already, it's Jess Leventry. So super simple.
I will link it down in the description to make it easy. I would encourage anybody listening to reach out to Jess if you just need a smile. And Jess, thank you for being on the podcast, for trusting me with your programming, for working so hard, and just for showing up every single day and being a light for those around you. I appreciate you more than you know.
Thank you, Joe. I appreciate it.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Project Indoor podcast, go ahead and subscribe, leave a review on your platform of choice, and share this episode with a friend. It helps us get more conversations like this out to more people like you. We appreciate you, and we'll talk to you next time. And one more thing. If you're looking for a community of people all striving to be better together, check out the Project Indoor Hard Things Club. The link is in the description below. We'd love to have you.